7 minutes. That's all it took for Jasmine Crockett to shatter Byron Donalds on the House floor. In front of 435 lawmakers and millions watching, she ripped away his mask of power. The fury was real. But did she just win justice or unleash chaos? The House chamber hums, polished wood, velvet, ritual. Cameras blink. One crack of the gavel and the room holds its breath. On the far wall, a clock pulls each second tight as wire. Byron Donalds steps forward like a man born to the mic. He squares his papers. The seal overhead doesn't bless him. It judges. He clears his throat and the floor tilts toward him. He names it, HR 4922, the DC crime bill. The Constitution arrives in his first breath, held up like a key, flashed like a blade. He talks of order, of duty, of a capital city frayed to threads. Pressure creeps in, a pen clicks too fast, a legal pad curls, a whisper dies midair. Members lean back then forward, as if a tide just shifted beneath their chairs. The script of power is being read, line by deliberate line. He paints a picture, streets that won't sleep, glass that doesn't stay whole, families that count footsteps after dark. In his telling, Florida is order that doesn't flinch. DC is failure with a pulse. He promises stitches. He reaches for a hammer. Sentences land like mallets on cold iron, measured, heavy, echoing into the press gallery. The red lights on the cameras burn a little brighter, catching the gleam of cufflinks and the guarded flickers of eyes. Somewhere high in the rafters, dust turns slowly in the beam. He steadies the podium with one hand, the room with the other, and promises clarity where there is fog. The chamber listens, rigid and formal, pretending not to taste the copper of coming weather. And beneath the choreography of protocol, a pressure front forms, invisible and undeniable. 3 rows back, Jasmine Crockett is stillness with an edge. Her eyes don't watch him, they measure him. While Donalds' words roll heavy and rehearsed, Jasmine Crockett listens in silence. Every syllable feeding the storm she keeps locked behind her ribs. The camera pans across faces in the chamber, but when it lands on her, the tension tightens. Her stare doesn't wander. It fixes, precise and unyielding, as if she were already cross-examining the man at the podium. This is not a passive audience. This is a lawyer trained in the crucible of injustice, a woman who has carried the weight of entire communities into courtrooms where mercy was rare and truth was often smothered. Her past leaks into the room, public defender hours, verdicts decided before dawn, a voice trained to cut and hold. Now in the theater of Congress, that same fire flickers beneath her calm exterior. Colleagues glance at her, but quickly look away. They've seen that look before. The look of someone who doesn't just prepare to speak, but prepares to strike. To them, she is unpredictable, dangerous, and utterly committed. To her community, she is a lifeline. To Byron Donalds, though he doesn't know it yet, she is the reckoning that waits just beyond his final sentence. And as his speech stretches toward its crescendo, Crockett leans forward slightly, her silence more deafening than any applause. The storm is no longer forming. It has already arrived, disguised in stillness, waiting for the exact second to erupt. The chamber holds its breath as she rises. One deliberate motion, chair legs scraping against polished floor, slicing the silence sharper than a gavel. Jasmine Crockett does not rush. She ascends with the gravity of someone who knows the weight of every eye, every camera, every heartbeat now synchronized with her steps. Her figure, framed against the cold marble columns, is not that of a mere lawmaker, but of a prosecutor entering court. Papers clutched in one hand, conviction in the other, she looks not at Donalds but through him, past the veneer of authority, into the shadows of history he hopes will remain untouched. The gallery leans forward, sensing that the air has shifted, that this will not be another speech drowned in procedure. She lifts the mic. Let's talk about mercy. The glass breaks on the first word. Her tone cuts across the chamber. She invokes not just policy but principle, not just law but life, recalling the countless faces of young men and women who never received the chances granted to the very man standing so proudly a few feet away. Every sentence drips with both accusation and truth, transforming the ornate hall into a courtroom where hypocrisy sits in the defendant's chair. Donald stiffens, fingers tightening on his notes. The chamber trembles under the shift. No longer an arena of scripted politics, but a trial by fire, presided over by one voice that refuses to be silenced. Crockett's eyes gleam under the relentless lights, and for the first time all evening, power looks unsettled. Truth today, will it cut armor or just spark? Byron Donalds steadies himself at the podium, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the chamber as though daring anyone to interrupt. He leans into the microphone, voice thick with conviction, and begins to weave a story designed to frighten, to captivate, to control. Washington, D.C., he declares, has become a city of shadows, a capital overrun by crime, crippled by weak leadership, a cautionary tale dressed in monuments and marble. Every word is painted in bold strokes, like a trial lawyer bending the jury's mind before evidence is even shown. He conjures images of broken glass on sidewalks, of families trapped in fear after dark, of a city once great now rotting under the weight of so-called progressive policies. The chamber listens, some nodding along, others stiffening at the distortion. His tone is not just warning, it is condemnation, a sermon meant to leave no room for mercy. Then he pivots. No pause, no blink. His voice sharpens, turning homeward. Florida, he says, is proof. Law unbent, order intact. Streets safe, families unafraid. He lifts it as the nation's model, not just a state but a shield. Against it, D.C. is cast as failure. Broken, punished, unworthy. His message is simple. Florida saves, D.C. falls. Applause ripples softly from his allies, the kind of applause that says more about loyalty than truth. To the cameras, he is the picture of strength. To the public watching, he is the man with answers. Yet beneath the gloss of his words lies something brittle, something unspoken. He builds his illusion brick by brick, but every wall he raises trembles, for one voice in the chamber already knows where the cracks are. The applause fades, but the silence that follows feels heavier than stone. Jasmine Crockett rises again, her eyes locked not on the chamber, but on Byron Donalds himself. The room stiffens, sensing that what is about to unfold is no longer debate, but cross-examination, and the defendant has already been called to the stand. Her voice cuts clean through the still air, calm at first, then sharpening with each word. She reminds the chamber of a story not written in polished speeches, but carved into court records. He once stood before a judge. His record was cleared. He was given mercy, probation, a clean slate, another chance. Her gaze sweeps the room, each word heavy with the weight of memory. This man, she says, her voice rising, was not destroyed by his mistakes. He was redeemed by the system's grace. Murmurs ripple across the chamber, the kind of murmurs that no gavel can quiet. She doesn't stop. She refuses to, because this, she knows, is not about Byron Donalds alone. It is about the millions who never received the mercy he was given. She leans into the microphone, her tone now thunder. You climbed on mercy. Now you kick the ladder. Gasps cut through the chamber. Donalds shifts, gripping the podium tighter, his polished illusion cracking under the weight of undeniable truth. For a moment, the chamber feels less like Congress and more like a courtroom where hypocrisy stands trial. The evidence is laid bare, redemption for one, punishment for others. Crockett doesn't flinch, doesn't falter. She knows that every syllable is more than rhetoric. It is revelation. And in that revelation, the mask begins to slip. Silence, detonation, shouts, gavels, red lights hunting faces. Half the room claps, half the room lunges. Cameras zoom in, capturing every twitch, every glare, every flicker of fear. The gallery hums with electricity, reporters scribbling furiously, knowing this is the moment the story shifts. Some members clap softly, hesitant yet resolute, their applause drowned quickly by shouts across the aisle. The clash is raw, unfiltered, and impossible to contain. Crockett does not retreat. She stands unmoved, her silence now more dangerous than her words. It is the silence of a prosecutor after presenting evidence too damning to ignore, daring the jury to deny what they have seen. The chamber trembles, not from noise alone, but from the realization that a fault line has been exposed, and no speech, no slogan, no polished illusion can cover it again. Was this the moment America finally saw hypocrisy stripped bare? The tremors of that night did not end with the gavel. By dawn, chyrons, split screens, knives with smiles. Out of control, a danger to decorum. Loops on every channel. Her face became a lightning rod, flashing across TV screens with a label few in power survive. Radical. Online, the fire only burned hotter. Threats, insults, doctored images flooding her accounts. One message hissed, "Watch your step. We're coming for you." Outside, a crowd turned her name into a warning, each chant a drumbeat of menace echoing in her staff's ears. Rivals pounced on cameras, calling her reckless, a stain on the institution. Outrage was their weapon, scandal their shield. Every line rehearsed, every blow aimed to bury her words. But beneath the fury was fear. They knew she had cut too close, so they tried the oldest trick: smear her, drown her out, hope the public forgets. Crockett did not forget. She watched the coverage, felt the chill of threats crawl under her skin. The storm was brutal, designed to break her, but the desperation to silence her proved she had already drawn blood. By nightfall, alone in her office, silence pressed heavy as stone. In the window's reflection, she barely knew herself, eyes raw, jaw tight, carrying all the words she could not yet speak. Her phone buzzed with another wave of threats, cruel words that sliced deeper than she cared to admit. She turned it face down, but the venom lingered in her mind, whispering doubts that grew louder in the stillness. Was I reckless? Did I hand them the ammunition they needed? Will they crush me before I can even fight again? The questions circled like vultures, and for the first time in years, her conviction wavered. She leaned back, closing her eyes, memories rushing in of courtrooms where she once stood alone against impossible odds. Back then, the fight was for one client, one life on the line. Now it was for thousands, maybe millions, and the scale of it pressed down with suffocating force. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if silence would have been easier, if blending into the background would have spared her the rage now crashing over her. Then a knock at the door. A staffer entered quietly, holding a stack of letters, their edges worn from hurried hands. "These came today," he whispered, leaving them on her desk before stepping out. With trembling fingers, she opened one. Inside, in careful handwriting, a mother wrote, "Thank you for speaking for my son. He made mistakes, but he deserves another chance, like the one your colleague once had." She read another and another, a veteran thanking her for fighting for redemption, a teacher telling her students had cheered watching her stand tall, a young man admitting he felt seen for the first time. Each word, each signature, chipped away at the doubt gnawing inside her. The storm outside was real, but so was this. This was why she had entered the arena, why she carried scars and stood through fire. Jasmine Crockett sat a little straighter, her pulse steadying, her reflection in the glass slowly hardening back into the woman she knew. The doubts hadn't vanished, but they no longer owned her. Somewhere in the distance, she could already feel the next battle calling her name. Morning broke with the Capitol still wrapped in tension, but beyond its marble walls, something unexpected stirred. Parksville. Cardboard blooms. Lift as you climb. Mercy isn't a privilege. The chant finds a tempo and refuses to stop. In cities far from D.C., the spark spread. Churches opened their doors for rallies, community leaders held vigils under candlelight, and hashtags carrying her name surged across the internet like wildfire. Stand with Crockett trended for days, as strangers shared stories of brothers, daughters, and neighbors whose lives had been shattered from mistakes less severe than those smoothed over in the past of powerful men. Inside her office, Crockett watched the footage in silence. She saw faces lit by conviction, young people chanting her words as though they were scripture, elders nodding with pride as if to say, finally, someone remembered us. She felt the weight of being more than a politician. She had become a vessel, a mirror of hope that others poured themselves into. For once, the attacks from opponents felt like background noise compared to the roar rising from the streets. Her staff rushed in with updates, breathless, protests in Florida, vigils in New York, marches in Chicago. The movement was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt the scales of justice tip against them. It was messy, raw, imperfect, but alive. And in that living fire, she saw the future refusing to be ignored. The backlash had sought to bury her. Instead, it had planted a seed. And as the chants outside grew louder, as signs waved against the backdrop of the Capitol dome, Jasmine Crockett realized she was no longer just a congresswoman. She was a symbol, a rallying cry, a spark that had caught flame. Could a single voice ignite a movement strong enough to bend Congress? Order returns on paper only. He doubles down, fear dressed as policy. She stands. Names, dates, lives. The room doesn't argue, it flinches. She invoked names of real people, youths imprisoned for mistakes that mirrored Donald's own, families torn apart while others were given grace. Each example struck like a hammer against the facade of his argument. The chamber vibrated with energy, members shouting over one another, the speaker's gavel cracking in vain. Reporters scribbled furiously in the gallery. Cameras zoomed close enough to catch beads of sweat forming on foreheads. The air was hot, electric, alive with the clash of two visions for America. One rooted in punishment, the other in redemption. It was no longer a policy dispute. It was combat, raw and merciless, each word flung like a weapon. The chamber had become a coliseum, and every member within it knew history was watching. The roar from outside seeped through the walls, a reminder that this battle did not belong only to those on the floor. It belonged to the people who would feel its weight long after the gavel fell. The chamber, already vibrating with tension, sank into a taut silence as Jasmine Crockett gripped the microphone. She didn't raise her voice at first. She let the stillness draw every ear, every camera, every restless heart toward her. Then, with the precision of a blade unsheathed, she began. She spoke of truth, but not the sanitized version that politicians love to parade. She named names, told stories of sons jailed for carrying what Donalds once carried, of daughters sentenced harshly for mistakes that had once been forgiven for men with connections. Each word was a mirror held up to hypocrisy, forcing the chamber to look at itself and recoil. Her voice rose, pulsing with anger and grief, yet wrapped in a clarity that cut through the noise. Redemption isn't a perk for power, she says. It's the promise. If you take it from DC's kids, don't call that justice. Call it what it is. She paused, scanning the room. Some lawmakers avoided her gaze. Others clenched their jaws. But no one could escape the gravity of her words. She leaned closer, voice low but fierce, the kind of tone that carries farther than a shout. If Byron Donalds had lived under the laws he now demands, he would not be standing here. He would be another statistic, another young black man branded for life. The room rippled with gasps, some in anger, some in reluctant recognition. Crockett's hand struck the podium, not in rage but in finality, as if sealing the record of history itself. We are not here to protect power. We are here to protect people. And if you cannot remember mercy when it saved one of your own, then you have no right to deny it to the voiceless. Her final words rang like thunder against stone, reverberating far beyond the chamber. In that moment, Jasmine Crockett was not just a congresswoman. She was a warrior of truth, and her battlefield was the conscience of a nation. The last echoes of Crockett's speech had barely faded when the chamber split like glass under pressure. Half the lawmakers rose in applause, pounding their desks with a fury that matched her words. The other half shouted back, red-faced, branding her reckless, dangerous, unfit. The gavel struck again and again, but the order of Congress was shattered. The divide was carved deep and raw. Outside, the nation mirrored the chaos. News networks ran her speech on repeat, commentators sparring as fiercely as the lawmakers themselves. To some, she was a hero, the voice America had been waiting for. To others, she was an arsonist in pearls, setting fire to the fragile fabric of governance. Hashtags surged, protests swelled, and dinner tables across the country became battlegrounds of their own. Through it all, Jasmine Crockett stood unshaken. She didn't retreat to back rooms or hide from the cameras. She faced the storm head-on, her posture unyielding, her gaze steady, as though she had always known this moment would come. She doesn't look triumphant. She looks decided. History can handle the rest. The chamber was no longer just divided, it was scarred. And yet in those scars lay the raw proof that something deeper than politics had been touched, something that would not heal quickly. Crockett had forced America to look at itself, and the reflection was jagged, painful, undeniable. Would her fire change the law, or only leave scars? The dust of battle lingered in the chamber long after the final gavel fell. The D.C. Crimes Act stood suspended in uncertainty, not yet struck down, not yet victorious, a bill teetering on the knife's edge of votes and amendments. But while the law remained undecided, one thing was beyond dispute. Jasmine Crockett's words had ignited a fire that no one could extinguish. Cable news replayed her speech on a loop, not as filler, but as headline. Editorial boards debated her ferocity, some condemning it, others lauding it as the rare sound of honesty piercing the static of politics. Her image, once a silhouette in the back rows, now filled screens across America. Raised fist, steady glare. The embodiment of a truth too raw to ignore. In communities often left unheard, her defiance became scripture. Churches wove her words into sermons. Teachers played her speech in classrooms, and young activists scrawled her quotes on cardboard signs. To them, the outcome of the bill mattered less than the revelation that someone inside the Capitol dared to speak their struggle aloud. Even her opponents, though they sneered in public, adjusted their tones behind closed doors. They had felt the tremor, knew the ground beneath them was shifting. Crockett had not simply challenged a bill, she had drawn a line, forcing America to choose which side of history it wanted to stand on. She walked out of the Capitol that night exhausted, battered but unbroken. The law might still hang in limbo, but her message had already traveled farther than any vote could carry it. For once, power had been forced to listen, and whether they admitted it or not, the echoes of her stand would haunt every corridor of Congress for years to come. The Capitol lay quiet behind her, its towering dome glowing like a watchful sentinel against the night. Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her apartment, the chaos of the day reduced to silence, broken only by the hum of a city that never truly sleeps. Her suit jacket was draped across a chair, her notes scattered like fallen leaves across the table. But her thoughts wandered far beyond marble halls and microphones. She replayed the storm in her mind, the clash, the fury, the backlash. For every moment of doubt, she now saw faces. The mother who wrote to her about her son, the students who marched chanting her name, the veterans who thanked her for giving voice to the forgotten. Their voices stitched together into a chorus, louder than any insult hurled her way. The strength that had carried her through the chamber did not come from herself alone. It was borrowed piece by piece from those who believed in her. She leaned back, staring at the ceiling, exhaling a breath that trembled with both weariness and resolve. Power, she realized, wasn't in the podium or the gavel. Power was in the people who stood when us standing was dangerous, who spoke when silence was safer. She had not fought for herself that day. She had fought with them, and for them, every word an echo of their struggle. Her reflection in the window looked different now, less tired, more tempered, like steel forged in fire. The weight she carried was immense, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a calling. She whispered softly into the quiet, as if answering the unspoken question of the night. I am not alone, and because of that, I will not stop. In the stillness, the warrior understood her truest strength. It was not in her defiance, nor in her fire, but in the community that refused to let her flame die. The storm of debate had ended, but what lingered was not noise. It was a question etched into the conscience of a nation. Jasmine Crockett's stand revealed something larger than a clash of bills or parties. It stripped justice down to its essence. Does it serve all, or does it serve only the powerful? History, she reminded them, is littered with nations that proclaim liberty while denying it to many. Redemption cannot be a privilege locked behind status, race, or influence. It must be a bridge open to every person, especially the young whose futures teeter between mistake and possibility. Without that bridge, justice is only punishment dressed in a mask of fairness. This wasn't spectacle. It was a measure. Do we punish to prove power or forgive to grow it? The mirror is up. What do we do with it? What kind of America will we choose to leave for tomorrow? Justice will never survive if mercy is reserved only for the powerful. Don't just watch. Carry this moment with you. Hit subscribe so you never miss the stories that cut through noise and uncover the battles shaping America's future. Tap share, because one voice becomes unstoppable only when millions echo it. And in the comments, tell us, if you stood where Jasmine Crockett stood, staring down hypocrisy and power, would you rise to speak or choose silence? This retelling is dramatized, inspired by public events, created solely for storytelling, education, and commentary, not legal advice or final judgment.